personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know right now. I have a special guest on the show, Heath Spencer. He is the CEO of TraitWare. He's also a passwordless multi-factor authentication solution leader. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, Debbie. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, well, we've actually met before, and we have a friend in common, right?
We do.
Elizabeth Perry. She's my ethics person in Barcelona, and she thought we'd be able to meet, and so we met and we hit it off. We thought it'd be a great idea for us to have a podcast together. Well, you're in the U.S. in the Reno area.
We are.
I would love to talk about, first of all, kind of your journey into technology and sort of what made this area around sort of passwordless multi-factor authentication a passion of yours.
Yeah, so I'm old enough that my technology journey started, early in high school, where the internet was first coming out, and then in my early entrepreneur days, I had a retail rental brick and mortar business that we opened in the 90s, leading into the original .com boom. And so we went through the original movement of trying to take physical businesses into the digital realm. With the initial envoy into that was really around how do you expand your reach with goods and wares, and being able to sell those and deliver those and all of those things. And at that very early onset of that, I had to learn very quickly about how to operate within that, and then the type of information and data that was required to transact business in the digital world. And so, my digital journey with data and privacy started early on around that original .com boom, and then kind of, took a different path for a little while. And then ultimately around 2017, after some different things we did, have built this company today that is really started out as, after we had sold a prior business, said, what do we want to solve for ourselves, right? And at that point, the explosion of the use of passwords in our lives to access all of these digital accounts that we had created, and how we were, from our consumer accounts, paying your power bill, whatever it is, you have a lot of data about yourself out there on those platforms or those services that you've registered for. And, there's comedy routines around how frustrating passwords are. And we thought, man, there's got to be a way to use modern technology to improve this and do it in a different way than just adding layers of security, which ultimately added layers of frustration to us as the people having to do those steps to try to protect our own data and privacy, right?
Yeah. So actually, you're pretty fortunate that this topic has been in the news a lot lately.
It has.
Around, Apple and what they're doing with their different authentication methods. The FIDO Alliance, I think Apple recently joined the FIDO Alliance, is looking into different ways to create a passwordless future. I'll say one of my pet peeves about passwordless, when people say that, I guess in my view, I don't know, maybe it's passcode. So even though someone's not using words, what they're doing is, instead of using words that we know is something that can be stolen, they can be, cloned and different things like that, having another way for people to use a code or an identifier of some sort to take the place of a password, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways that different companies are working to solve this problem, right? In its early stages, Apple has made this announcement recently that they're really on track to try to do it by September of this year. And they're using, technologies similar to kind of what we've created and are doing. And in that, instead of creating, and then there's other technologies that I would phrase are more of a passwordless experience versus real passwordless. In that, a simple way to think about it is at any point of the life cycle of the account that you have with whatever service provider that is, whether that's your email provider, your utility company, your Dropbox or Box account where you're storing files, et cetera. Did you ever have to create a password anywhere in that process, like the first day that you created that account? And then, and a good example is a lot of the mobile banking apps today allow for a passwordless experience after you've registered their mobile app. So the example of that is you create the account using a username and password, you install their banking app, and then you register that banking app using your password. And then after the fact, you could turn on Face ID or fingerprint, depending on whether or not you're on an iOS device or an Android device, et cetera. And so the example in that use case is they're now just obfuscating the password from your experience, right, in that login attempt, which is great for convenience, but not so great for security. And so what we do and what Apple's striving to do is to be able to leverage different ways to identify who you are without ever having to create that knowledge base factor, or a code that could be shared or passed across a different type of platform. So receiving an SMS code or receiving a one-time code in your email, those are all things that really could be transferred from you as the rightful person to possess that to a potential bad actor through, phishing attack or social engineering. And so really the goal needs to be to get to a phishing resistant or a phishing proof or social engineering proof type of, what Apple's calling a pass key. What we do is we actually create a dynamic or rotating key based on how you interact with your mobile device, and then use that to transfer a tokenized mathematical identity of you to the relying party, which would be the service that you're trying to access, the application that you're trying to sign into. So there is a big difference between achieving strong authentication through what we call multi-factor authentication, which is, multiple factors of who you are, or ways to authenticate you are who you say you are. So a really brief description of, we've seen the evolution of this go from single factor, which was just your password, to then what was called two-factor authentication, where you had your password and then a one-time code that either you got in email or SMS, like we just talked about, to then what is multi-factor today really needs to be something you are, something you possess, right? Or something or somewhere you are, or some other hidden key that's within your possession on a device, right? And so you need at least 3 of those factors to have multi-factor authentication. So how do you do that and without adding layers of frustration for you as the person?
I feel like, so basically people who use a username and password, that's kind of one factor. So that's kind of
Correct.
the world that we live in right now.
Yeah.
There are many apps or applications or companies that are trying to force people to at least do two-factor authentication. And then you're moving into a kind of a different realm, which is kind of more than two-factor. So tell me a little bit how, you don't have to tell me the secret sauce part, but tell me a little bit how your company is different in terms of how you deal with multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, so we take that approach of, you need either a something you possess, which is either a hardware-based key or a software-based token. We thought that, we're already all, 97% of U.S. adults, which the stats are pretty similar across the globe, have a smartphone today, one that's typically biometrically enabled, et cetera. And so we're already carrying around this mobile device that's a smart device. How do we leverage the use of that to create a secure key to sign in anywhere, right? We're not just work on our phone, but then sign into our laptop or desktop. Really, you could use it to sign into a TV screen, like any screen that's connected, right? And so rather than having to purchase another hardware type of key, which we've seen with, one of the Microsoft's big partners is Yubico. They make the YubiKey. Google makes a hardware key called the Titan key. There's other keys that are out there. One of the originators of this was RSA. And they, if you were in the financial industry back in the day, you for sure had an RSA key that generated this randomized 13-digit code that you had to enter, at the time of doing that. So looking at modern technology, we said, look, we're already carrying this phone. How do we create a software-based application that could create this unique tokenized identity of you, and then use that to be able to sign in or log in, authenticate you to other environments? And so we have an app-based authenticator, just like you may have used like Google Authenticator or Authy or Duo or an app like that to get a one-time code for your 2FA. We created something like that and just took it a step further to deliver multi-factor authentication. And in that process can actually create your account and authenticate you without ever having to create a password. Now, I do want to clarify that our initial available solution today is really focused for business solutions and focused at businesses. We hope to be able to extend this to consumer use in the near future. But right now we're really focused on, how to help secure the businesses anywhere from a small business up to an enterprise business.
I think the business aspect is very important because businesses obviously have to use these smartphones. So your statistic, as you talk about the adoption of smartphones, I think it is probably around maybe 90 for businesses, but worldwide for individuals is only about 45%, even though we know that the US obviously has a higher rate of smartphone adoption.
I agree with that, but I do want to say that even in other countries, we're seeing a movement to mobile devices, particularly Android devices, because they are tremendously more accessible and affordable than trying to get everyone a computer or a laptop. And the computing power that the mobile devices have these days really allow people to access their, health records, everything. We've seen this big push over the last 2 years during the pandemic, and then this leads into a whole different discussion around privacy and data protection. But moving to a vaccine passport type of thing, there's a big push to get to a bigger adoption of mobile devices globally, and so we think that it's a viable path even in the other countries. And really, again, for workforce, it's particularly very viable.
Yeah, obviously you're right. So the adoption is growing. It's not quite where it should be. I think one of the issues that people have had with sort of Apple and even FIDO doing this, even though all those things are great, I think a lot of the news reporting is like, oh, well, passwords are going away. It's like, well, no, not really, because for people who don't have smartphones, who still, to me, is a significant number of people, they have to have an alternate way of accessing things. And right now, their only option is passwords. So I think, as you say, I think, we're seeing obviously more mobile device adoption over even laptops and tablets.
Well, they are. And so, I mean, but it gets tricky, and this is why a lot of service providers haven't moved this direction yet or making it OEM yet, because they don't want to preclude anyone from accessing their service. We fully understand that. There has to be multiple paths to success. and allowing for multimodality of access controls is one of the central points. When everyone's moving around standards, so we leverage standards for our process as well, with FIDO, OAuth, OpenID Connect, SAML, we're integrating using standards, and then those standards can be implemented and allow for multiple paths to get there. So even when you're discussing, what Apple's just announced and what other things are doing, whether it's IBM, et cetera, and we've got, we're a security technology partner for them, and we're, for different companies like Citrix, et cetera. If there's an employee or even a consumer in another country that's accessing something online, they have some sort of digital device, whether they have a mobile device or not. They're on a PC or a laptop, a tablet, something. And so tablets are also becoming very, very prevalent as kind of the hybrid between a computer or just a phone, right? Our process can work on any mobile device, which includes all of the tablets. So it's very prevalent there. Then when you look at the standards that they're looking at through FIDO, et cetera, you can do those. Like Apple's not going to restrict it just to being used on a phone. If there's a fingerprint reader, or if we look at Windows devices that have Windows Hello, with Face ID for there, you're going to be able to implement those types of biometric keys on a computer as well as a mobile device. So it won't be restricted to just a mobile device. Does that make sense? So those processes and those standards will be available. It becomes trickier on a shared device, right? So the reason we really like having a mobile device is that's typically you have your mobile phone and you're not necessarily sharing that with other people. Now, in less fortunate families or something, there might be only one mobile phone. And there is a way that you could create, user profiles on a shared device, right? Laptops do this today. PCs do this today, whether it's a Mac or a Windows device. Mobile devices can do this. You can have user profiles, and then under that user profile, create your behavioral biometric, your native biometric based keys, et cetera, doing that. So I do think that there's, anyone that's accessing something digitally is going to be on some sort of computerized device, or they're not accessing something digitally. So looking at the global adoption of cell phones, you have to take into the account of, well, a large percentage of the people that don't have a cell phone just aren't using the internet at all. So, there's certain parts of the world that just, they don't have internet connectivity, period. And so then they don't have a digital identity. So they're not in need of these processes yet. But the bottom line is that over 80% of every data breach, ransomware attack, et cetera, still comes down to a password being the number one root cause of that. And so if we're going to focus on solving what is going to be $1 trillion problem across the globe in the near future, we have to start with the largest common denominator of users, which that's people using a mobile phone and being online every day.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit about, let's talk about workforce now. So I think that, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I think that COVID pushed a lot more people towards digital transformation and being able to do more things with digital devices. Have you seen more adoption of tools like yours as a result of COVID?
So as a result of COVID and the pandemic, we all saw a massive movement to work from anywhere, right? A lot of people phrase it as work from home, but really it became work from anywhere. What this did is it then put, parents were having to homeschool their children at the same time of working from home, which means you have, going back to this recent, well, we just talked about shared devices, right? Well, now you've also got shared networks. And so we think we're seeing a tipping point now where a lot of businesses that are allowing people to now still remain at work from anywhere, and or this hybrid environment of come into the office a couple days a week and rotating just to keep the numbers of people, in the same environments down. As we have been seeing a recent resurgence of illness going around and everything, just like the flu, seasonal, et cetera. But with that, the need for security became very prevalent as you had a lot of co-mingled, no longer were on the corporate network and being able to rely on the old perimeter-based, moat and castle wall type protection of a firewall. And identity really became the new perimeter in how you did that. And if you, unfortunately were sharing, storing your passwords in a browser extension and then got off of your work call and your child needed to use your computer to do something for school real quick, gets on your computer, they accidentally click a malicious link. You end up with malware on your computer that's now looking for passwords that are saved or being autofilled. And now your company passwords are compromised, right? Because of this work from home and the potential exposure to shared devices is making it very aware for people to need to take identity seriously. And Ann Johnson, who's the vice president of cybersecurity at Microsoft, she's on a mission to help people reach 100% of MFA coverage across 100% of the employees, across 100% of the applications, because reaching that coverage of multi-factor authentication would prevent 99% of those ransomware attacks and data breaches. So if we want to talk about, privacy and protecting data, the goal has to be to get to multi-factor authentication everywhere. So how do you do that without driving people nuts and making them super frustrated about all these steps they have to take to then do their job?
Right. So I guess I want to talk a little bit about kind of decentralization. So as you use the analogy about people thought previously about security, like you're in a castle and that's how to protect, everything is locked in the castle. So people didn't really think about as much as they should have protection of those assets of that data when people weren't in the castle, right? When they were doing other things. But I feel like there's a shift, as it should be, in my view, from kind of the business idea about how identity works to kind of a more individual idea. So for me, I feel like the way it's going to go is that the people will have to be sort of a bank of their own information, and then they have to decide how they want to grant access to individuals, as opposed to them going to 100 sites and creating new username and passwords. What are your thoughts?
So I think that there is a world in where that's coming. There's been a lot of discussions around that, and the concept of bring your own identity, right? And I think the question is then who is the authority, right? Who is the single source of truth? How do you actually then know that person is who they say they are when they've created this digital profile? One of the things that people enjoy about being online is they can create an alias profile, right? A character of who they are, and maybe they can live out whatever life they want to choose under that false identity. And so one of the things that came up in a recent conversation with us and one of the VCs we've been talking to is around the identity proofing aspect of that. So I think with technologies moving forward like blockchain, et cetera, and being able to create these immutable records where once the identity is created, there's a way to track that and make sure that it stays the same and maintain anonymity, right? A certain amount of anonymity around that. And then you can then choose who gets to use that. And there's a lot of digital wallets that are moving this direction. I think there is a little bit of ways to go still on those ledgers. If we were doing that for everything, would become, right now we're relying on the individual businesses to absorb the cost and the expense of managing the identity of their customers. If we're making the switch to move that to where the consumer owns their identity and is in charge of managing it, who and where and what is storing that ledger, right? And is that the government? Do we really want to trust the government to have that? We do already to a certain extent. I mean, if in the US, if we just took social security numbers and our driver's license as our government ID, that's really our source of truth to go do anything else, right? We have to have those things to fly on a plane. We have to have those things to go open a bank account. And so most likely, fortunately or unfortunately, it's going to come down to some sort of centralized identity store to then allow you as the person to manage that. I don't have the answer today on how that really plays out, but there's still a lot of things, to sort out that, like, someone, you're going to have to trust someone, whether that's Apple, right? Do you want to trust Apple to be your identity store? Do you want to trust Google to be your identity store? I mean, already today, we already see a lot of applications, and people are doing this today, right? You can go to websites today and click sign in with Facebook or sign in with Google or sign in with something else, right? They've already tried to make that somewhat convenient where you can use this single identity, your Google identity or your Facebook identity, and then as a trusted source, use that somewhere else, right? So but even in that aspect, in that simple aspect, if I had taken the time to build up a strong enough profile on Facebook, whether it was real or not, and then I could use that to sign into other things, I now don't have identity proofing of actually knowing that I'm the real person, right? This is, if we talk about what's in the news right now, and one of Elon's concerns about, moving forward with the acquisition of Twitter is how many bots are there, right? Because they want validation that there's really a human somewhere behind those accounts, and they're struggling to be able to prove that. And I think there's a lot of monetary aspects of that as well, because if you look at ad revenue models from different companies, et cetera, they get paid just on impressions, not actually click through. So if there's bots that are viewing your ad, then they're charging you for that impression, right? So how are we going to deal with actually knowing if we're moving to a self-sovereign identity? How are we going to deal with identity proofing that it's really a human? And that's something I'm not sure is there yet.
Very good, very good. Let's talk a little bit about privacy and identity, right? So I think in the US is very much intertangled together. Like a lot of times people talk about privacy and they mean cybersecurity or vice versa, and it really isn't, there's obviously a symbiotic relationship there for sure. But as you were talking about, when you were talking about bots, it just sort of reminded me about the need for being able to determine if someone is human or not. And then, obviously, I think we saw something in the news about someone at, was it Google, who thought that there was some chat bot that was sentient or something like that. So, well, that's
it's very recent in the news. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but we have to be realistic that with quantum computing being really where it is today and moving forward fast, and we look at how fast, really, if you think about it, from the late 80s to where we are today, which is only really 3 decades, how quickly did technology evolve? Right. I'm old now, so I've seen a lot of it. But it's kind of, it's only going to move quicker. So I think there is a lot of things to answer around that. Now, a lot of the questions we get around privacy and using modern things, even with Apple's announcement last week around using Face ID or fingerprints as a way to generate your your keys, right? To then use those keys things. A lot of people's hesitation, one of the questions we get around privacy or anonymity or, personal information, right, is, well, with a password, I could change my password. It's something I controlled. If I use my biometric, and that gets taken, it's gone forever. That's their perception, right? And they're worried that I would never be able to get that back. If I use my face to register something and someone takes it, then it's gone forever. Well, a couple things with that. One is, if you've ever done a video call like this that we're doing, or you've got pictures on Facebook, your face is no longer private anyway. It's already out there. Someone can model it. But I want people to understand, particularly around iOS devices, and one thing that Apple is doing well and Android's improving on is how they're leveraging the use of biometrics for the native biometric, right? So a lot of us have become comfortable unlocking our phone with our face or unlocking our phone with our fingerprint. And in that use case, what people need to understand around the privacy aspect of it is Apple or Android, they're not storing an actual picture or a realistic representation of your biometric, meaning there's not a picture of my face in my phone that it's mapping against when I unlock my phone. What's in my phone is a math equation, right? So when I register my biometric, whether it's my fingerprint, my face, it could be my voice as a template, right? It could be a bunch of different things. It's really simply a math equation that's running math around certain checkpoints around your face or your fingerprint, et cetera, and generating a number based on that mathematical representation. Well, if we're using math, then we can actually change the math just like you would change a password, right? So this perception that if I use biometrics and they get stolen, they're stolen forever. Well, that's incorrect, right? Because it's not. So we can maintain privacy. Now, the other advantage when we talk about privacy and using biometrics on a mobile device is the user stays in the possession of that at all times, right? So they register it on the mobile device. They can delete it. The moment they delete it, and if they choose to re-register it, you actually have new math. So that's just like changing a password. It also means that companies like ours can take advantage of using that math equation without actually ever knowing that math equation. We just get to check against it. And you as the user stay in possession of it. So we allow you to maintain the privacy and the control of that math. And we can just use it as a way to verify that it is you, because you had to register it before registering our product, right? So, there's privacy, there's really actually stringent privacy laws in Illinois, and then California is very closely behind. So a year and a half ago, we saw a 16-year-old sue Six Flags Magic Mountain because they stored his biometric template without his permission, right? So that was a violation of his privacy. If Six Flags had been using a technology like ours, where the user chose to register the biometric on a device that they possess, and then just leveraged the use of that, Six Flags would not have been sued because they would not have been storing the biometric without the user's permission, right? So it really, technologies like what Apple's going to do with FIDO and what we're doing allow the user to maintain that possession of the math and maintaining the privacy of it, but allow for the creation of strong authentication out of that. So I think that that's a very unique way where privacy and security are overlapping, but overlapping in a really good way.
Excellent, excellent. And just for anyone who doesn't know what FIDO is, it's Fast ID Online. Yeah. And there's actually an alliance called the FIDO Alliance. And I think their website is fido.org, if I'm not mistaken. So very cool. Anyone who cares about password stuff, wants to know the latest thing that's happening with manufacturers or standards, fido.org is a great place to start for sure. So if it were the world according to Heath, and we did everything he said, what would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world with anything, whether it's technology, law, human stuff? What are your thoughts?
Well, I do agree that I would love to see some way to control, or where we get, we're seeing this a lot with social media and influencers, right? Where they're getting to use their personal brand to generate revenue, right? And if all of these big companies are really taking your behavior and your personality and your personal traits, et cetera, and then monetizing that, I do think that as an individual, I'd love to see more self-sovereign control over that. And then one piece of advice I would give people based on that is, if you're using a solution that's free, you are the product. So if you don't want to be the product, then you might need to pay for the application, because they're going to have to monetize it some way. So, from a global aspect, I'd love to just see people take their digital lives more seriously, and the accountability of actually, being smarter around how they're managing their digital identity and their digital life. And not a lot of people, and I hear this every day, are like, well, I don't have anything that anyone wants to take, or I'm not worth enough for the bad guy to want to ransomware me. And that's just not true, unfortunately, because they're using automation and bots to attack any open door they can. You're going to suffer at some point if you don't take it seriously. So, my wish is that, and this is even with my own children, trying to teach them that they need to take their digital lives seriously, because it can impact their real world physical life, and it will today.
Excellent. So let people know how, if they're interested in finding out more about TraitWare, how do they get in contact with you guys? Yeah,
so just at our website, TraitWare.com is a great place to start, as well as, on LinkedIn, we've got a company profile, Facebook company profile, et cetera, YouTube videos, all under, on Twitter at TraitWare, as well as, don't hesitate to shoot me a message on LinkedIn as well. And it's just Heath Spencer at TraitWare. And we're here to answer any questions, and we, happy to answer any questions that anyone's got, especially around, how do you secure your small business today? I've got a heart for small businesses, as I've been a serial entrepreneur in small businesses for years, and they're really the ones that are the most exposed today.
I agree with that. Well, thank you so much. This is great. Elizabeth was correct for getting us together. I think you have some really great insights that the audience will really like to hear.
Well, thank you again for having me, Debbie, and great to get to spend some time with you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.